Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, my friends, and welcome back to Westpole. Today I bring you Al-Mizan's explanation and translation of Surah Quraysh. I hope you find this useful. Please remember to share this, both with Muslim and non-Muslim friends. Ta.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the All-Merciful, the Ever-Merciful. This surah was revealed in Mecca and consists of 4 verses. It speaks about God's favor upon Quraysh tribe with respect to their 2 annual journeys. Then it commands them to monotheism and serving the Lord of the house. Since the content of this surah somewhat relates to the content of Surah Al-Fil, some Sunni scholars have held that the 2 of them actually compose a single chapter, just as is said about Surah Al-Duh and Surah Al-Inshirah, based on the connection between them. This is also held to be the mainstream view among the Shias. However, the evidence put forward for this view does not suffice to prove it. The Sunnis proponents of this view rely on 2 pieces of evidence. 1. It is narrated that in Ubay bin Ka'b's manuscript of the Qur'an, these 2 surahs were not separated with, "In the name of Allah, the All-Merciful, the Ever-Merciful, Bism Allah al-Rahman al-Rahim." 2. It is narrated from Amr bin Maymun al-Azdi. Once I prayed the sunset prayer behind Umar bin al-Khattab. In the first rak'ah, he recited Surah Al-Tin, and in the second, he recited Alam Tara and Li'ilaf Quraysh, without separating them within the name of Allah, the All-Merciful, the Ever-Merciful. The opponents of this view have rebutted as follows. 1. There are also narrations that Ubay bin Ka'b separated these 2 surahs in his manuscript with "In the name of Allah, the All-Merciful, the Ever-Merciful." Therefore, the narrations conflict. 2. Assuming that the second narration is authentic, it is likely that the narrator simply did not hear Umar bin al-Khattab reciting, "In the name of Allah, the All-Merciful, the Ever-Merciful," or perhaps Umar recited it in his heart. Additionally, these accounts contradict a prophetic narration which says that God favored the Quraysh in 7 ways, among which was, a chapter of the Qur'an was revealed exclusively about them, which is Surah Quraysh. Finally, there are mass-transmitted, mutawatir narrations, which show that at the beginning of chapter 106, there is, "In the name of Allah, the All-Merciful, the Ever-Merciful," marking a separation from the last chapter. Shia proponents of this view rely on the following narrations. 1. Abu al-Abbas related from either Imams al-Baqir or as-Sadiq. Alam Tara Kayfa Fa'ala Rabbuka and Li'ilaf Quraysh are a single surah. 2. Al-Mufaddal bi Salih narrated from Imam al-Sadiq. Do not recite 2 surahs in a single rak'ah, except for Wa al-Duha and Alam Nashra, and Alam Tara Kayfa and Li'ilaf Quraysh. 3. Al-Ala narrated from Zayd al-Shaham said, "Once Imam al-Sadiq led the morning prayer for us, where he recited Wa al-Duha and Alam Nashra in 1 rak'ah." Response: the first narration by Abu Abbas is weak because it suffers from an unconnected chain of transmission, marfu. The second one, by Al-Mufaddal, is the best evidence for the 2 chapters being 2 separate surahs, because it says, "Do not recite 2 surahs," and then mentions these surahs, chapters 93 and 94, and chapters 105 and 106, as an exception to that. The third one, by Zayd al-Shaham, is also narrated slightly differently through 2 different chains of transmission, which can be insightful. 1. Ibn Muskan narrated from Zayd bin al-Shaham. Imam al-Sadiq led the prayer for us and recited Wa al-Duha and Alam Nashra. 2. Ibn Abi Umayr narrated from Zayd bin al-Shaham. Imam al-Sadiq led the prayer for us, where in the first rak'ah he recited Wa al-Duha, and in the second, Alam Nashra. The latter narration on the authority of Ibn Abi Umayr is an authentic narration which explicitly says that each surah was recited in a different rak'ah. This is contrary to Ibn Muskan's version, which has neither an explicit import, saraha, nor an apparent one, zuhur. As with the third narration above on the authority of Al-Ala, even though it apparently implies that the two chapters were recited in the same unit, rak'ah, its apparent import cannot stand the explicit text of Ibn Abi Umayyah's version. Some might argue that Ibn Abi Umayyah's narration pertains to an optional recommended prayer, nafila. However, this cannot be, since he says that the Imam led the prayer for us, salbina. This explicitly indicates a congregational prayer, because optional recommended prayers are not performed in congregation. In truth, if these narrations prove anything, it is only the permissible IT of reciting both surahs, both chapters 93 and 94, or both chapters 105 and 106, in a single unit of an obligatory prayer. Such combining of two chapters in a single unit of an obligatory prayer is not permitted for other chapters. Supporting this is a narration where Dawud al-Raqi says, "When dawn broke, Imam al-Sadiq stood up and recited the two calls to prayer, adhan and igama. Then he had me stand on his right side and started praying. In the first rak'ah, he recited Surah al-Fatiha and wa al-Duha, and in the second, he recited Surah al-Fatiha, and in the second, he recited Surah al-Fatiha and Qul huwa Allah ahad. Then he performed the Qunut and Salam and remained seated.
لإيلاف قريش إيلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف.
For harmonizing, li'ilaf, for the Quraysh, propitiating them in winter and summer journeys, rihla. According to Al-Raghib, ilf means gathering with harmony. One of its derivatives is ulfa, affinity, intimacy, familiarity. Quraysh is the name of the Prophet's clan. They were the descendants of Al-Nadr bi Kanana, who was called Quraysh. Rihla, according to Majma al-Bayan, is the state of journeying on a rahila, which means a strong camel. Here, rihla refers to how the Quraysh used to leave Mecca for trade journeys. The sanctuary of Mecca was a barren land, and they could not grow crops or raise farm animals. Therefore, they made a living through trade. Every year, they used to make 2 trips, one trip to Yemen in the winter and one to the Levant in the summer. This was how they survived. And in the honor of the sacred house, people respected them. They were safe on the road from highwaymen and at home from raids. For harmonizing, li'ilaf, for the Quraysh. The letter lam, for, at the beginning of this verse signifies justification, talil. The subject of this verse is God, who created peace and security, ilaf, among the Quraysh, harmonizing for them in winter and summer journeys. This verse shows what God harmonized and facilitated for the Quraysh. The implied meaning is, because God has made it safe and smooth for the Quraysh to travel in summer and winter,
فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت.
So let them serve, falyabudu, the Lord of this house, the letter fa. So, then therefore, at the beginning of this verse responds to a potential impression of either conditionality, shart, or differentiation, tafsil. In the first case, the meaning would be, if they do not serve him for his other countless bounties, then they should serve the Lord of this house, because he has facilitated these 2 seasons for their journeys. In the second case, the meaning would be, whatever may be the circumstance, then they must serve the Lord of this house. This would be similar to the usage of the letter fa in the verse, and thus be patient, fa ispir, for your Lord. In sum, these 3 verses say, The Quraysh must worship the Lord of this house because he has made it safe for them to travel in the summer and the winter. As a result, they can make a living in security. This is the meaning that we can infer, assuming that the chapter has a theme and context of its own, separate from the previous one. However, those who consider this surah to be a part and continuation of Surah Al-Fil have offered some alternative interpretations. 1. The letter lam in li'ilaf signifies a justification for something elided that is shown by the context. The implied meaning is, we did that to the riders of elephants as a blessing from us upon the Quraysh, in addition to how we have blessed them in their journeys during the summer and winter. This amounts to saying, blessing after blessing. Thus, it is said that the letter lam here means ila, to, toward, as narrated from Al-Farah. 2. The meaning is, we did that to the riders of elephants so that the Quraysh may be safely established and secured in Mecca. 3. The meaning is, we did that in order to pull the Quraysh back to Mecca. That is because when Abraham marched toward their town, they deserted it in fear of him. We destroyed him so that the Quraysh could return to Mecca and settle there in safety. And then Muhammad may be born there, to be appointed later as a bearer of glad tidings and warnings to the people. Authors comment, the problem with these views is whether one can deduce them from the theme and context of the chapter.
الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف.
Who has fed them against hunger and secured them from fear. This verse points to two evident blessing and favor of God upon them, namely food and safety, as a result of facilitating their two journeys. They could live in a land that was infertile and had safety while their neighbors did not. Therefore, they were commanded to worship the Lord of this house, who managed their affairs in the best way. Examining narrations. 1. Concerning for harmonizing for the Quraysh, harmonizing for them. Tafsir al-Qummi says, this was revealed about the Quraysh because they made a living through making two journeys, one to Yemen in the winter and one to the Levant in the summer. From Mecca, they used to take leather, nuts and seeds, and whatever sea traders would sell to them, such as spice. In the Levant, they would trade these for clothing, refined flour and grain. They used to get along with each other, kanu yata al-lafuna, on the path. They would travel in small groups, each group led by a chieftain from Quraysh. This was how they made a living. When God appointed his prophet, they no longer had to do that, because people came in droves to the prophet and made pilgrimage to the house.